Welcome back to From the Tap, where we continue on our customer leak series and talk a little bit more about customer leaks. So if you haven't seen the previous episode about customer leaks, you can go back and take a look at that one. But what we're talking about is customer leaks and the issues that or problems that a water utility or the customer would have from those customer leaks. In the previous episode, I talked about my own experience about not identifying a leak with an old system and getting a large bill. So we're going to continue on with this series and talk a little bit about leak forgiveness and bad debt. And again, the fun part of our series is Travis and I, my sidekick, get to sample beers as we go ahead and talk about these water topics. So we're still drinking Crooked Culture beers, and the beer that we have to sample now is There Goes the Neighborhood. And it's an Imperial Stout, and it's a little bit of their kind of flavory Imperial Stout where they call it their Imperial Cake Stout. Now, Travis doesn't like dark beers really that much, and I really like them. So I like to pick these beers, and I like to force him to drink the dark beers. I am making a mess with the beers. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this beer, but we're gonna talk a bit about customer side leaks and some of the things that causes issues with customer side leaks. Go ahead and pour your own beer then, if you didn't.
Pour my own beer.
Go for it.
You know, it's a little dark, a little rich. And I'm just wondering, is that like a team portrait there of Team Joe on the can there?
Yes, it is. So the couple topics that I'd like us to talk a little bit about when it comes to customer side leaks, and as they really relate to leak forgiveness in a utility or bad debt, is things like latency, how that latency adds to a high bill, how that high bill then lead to property damage, leak forgiveness, and bad debt. So those are some of the things that I'd like to talk about. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Travis, and let's talk about latency.
So think about a situation where potentially you had a leak, and it could be several hundred gallons, and you wouldn't get notification until you see the bill, and that might be at the end of the month, and it might be 10, 15 days after that took place. So you're 45 days into that leak. Think of how much water's going through there, and think how much that bill could be. And now the consumer comes in, and you talked about earlier having a $30 water bill and now a $230 water bill. So now you have this heartburn issue, and the utility has to deal with it. So that latency has created an escalation financially, and the utility has to deal with, do I give forgiveness? Do I try to make them pay for the water that went through the system? And do I write that off as bad debt? All of those things are tough, heartache dollars that technology can eliminate today that we didn't used to have. So what a great place we're in to remove that, because those heartache dollars are always pain points for the consumer and the utility to face with those people. And so you can use that technology, bring that in and broadcast that. So whether the utility wants to use through leak forgiveness, which is expensive for them, or bad debt write-off, both sides are financially tough, you know?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, leak forgiveness really leads to bad debt expense for them, right? Because if you're forgiving that leak, that was revenue that you had accounted for, billed the customer, and it's going away because you're giving them a forgiveness.
Not only that,
right?
but you spent the money to produce the water, clean it, pump it, move it, and treat it. So you had all those cost of goods sold. It's out the window if you didn't get any revenue for it, you know? So those are losses the utility has to write off, and today's technology can bring that forward and capture that, make the consumer aware, certainly shorten the time awareness in that latency period that's so important to remove the heartache out of the situation.
Now, I talked about the story I told, but a little bit more, like I knew, because I identified the actual leak before I got the bill. I was walking out to my car to go to the airport for
It only took
flight.
you a month to pick up on this, Joe, but you know, it's impressive that you got a hold of it, but you know, I'm glad that you saw the sprinkler was shooting up in the air.
Well, I noticed it at 4:30 in the morning, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna have a really high bill. I wonder how long that's been happening. So latency is a real thing. Latency will lead to that high bill, and you hit the nail on the head. If you have the latest technology, if you have AMI technology, the system will help you identify that. You can get that information to the customer. They could take care of that before they have a high bill and before you have to go ahead and give leak forgiveness.
Yeah, because now we're seeing it literally within 24, 48 hours, you're getting that notification. So what a great way to use technology to close that. Well, you want to talk about the beer?
You should probably take a sip of your beer because I know how much you love the dark beers.
I'm choking it down the best I can, buddy. Know it's your thing.
Did you even
birthday
try it?
cake. I did. It's birthday cake stout. I can taste the birthday cake in it.
Right. I like
cheers
this
to
one.
them.
I was really excited when I tasted it because I thought you would like this one.
They tell us that next year they have it in the can to actually take some of this beer and brew it up to make a special thing for their second anniversary. So. Yeah. I'll let you have that one in a year from now if producer Penny lets us stay on for a whole year.
The brewery, actually, when I introduced in the initial episode that if you haven't seen it, you should go back and take a look at it. They were actually opened in November of 2023. So this beer is their anniversary beer. So they did a little bit of special thing with the Imperial Stout. They added some lactose, some chocolate, some vanilla to it to kind of give it a little bit more of this Imperial Cake Stout that they call. It is a little bit on the sweet side, but it's really actually a good beer for people that appreciate beers, unlike Travis, who just likes those kind of lighter colored IPA beers that are really easy to drink. Now, we talked about latency, we talked about, say, the high bill or the, that's so fucked up. You should not make faces like that.
What are you talking about? I didn't make a face.
It'll be on the camera. What we really should think about too, from a leak perspective, latency perspective, on the customer side, property damage.
Exactly. So imagine if you're away from your house and you have a leak and you didn't get notified till you saw the bill. It could be 30, 60 days. And it doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of water to create a lot of property damage versus getting notification 24, 48 hours of, hey, you got a potential issue. And not only does that help the consumer protect their property, but it helps the utility protect their liability because they provided that information to the consumer as a potential issue. So it's good for both sides there. And I think that's understated in some of the technology that we see today.
The property damage is a real thing for the end customer. I mentioned it earlier, like the customer side leak is really the customer's responsibility. They get a large bill, they call the utility because they feel like the leak on their side is the utility's responsibility. It's really not, it's theirs.
They always think it's an error in the system, but often it's true actual flow through of the water. So.
You got it. I hate to do it, but I'm going to go back to the story I told because I'm in the water industry, I knew that I was going to have a high bill, but I called the utility anyway when I got the bill to see how they were going to react. And one of the things that they recommended is they knew they didn't have the data to help answer my question, but what was the thing that you think they recommended that they would do to fix it?
Look at the meter, or?
Yes, they said, we could send someone out to reread.
You're telling me a utility guy drove out there to look at something that didn't happen or they knew wasn't really a real problem?
I said they didn't have to do that because I didn't want them to waste a truck roll. But
that was kind of you, Joe. What was in your nature that day? I mean, that's different for you.
I didn't know that would just add to their cost, and all I would get is a correct read, to be honest. And I knew that the meter read was correct. I actually called because I wanted to hear, as someone in the industry who talks about smart metering AMI, I wanted to hear how they would solve the problem with a bi-monthly read, basically, which is even worse than getting a monthly read. It means they estimate for 1 month that prior utility, and then they read it once every 2 months. So.
Another thing that comes into play here is the advent of the consumer portal, where they can actually see their own usage, get alarms, get information pushed directly to their phone wherever they are, so they can get information back to them. That really helps curb that heartache dollar that we talked about earlier. So, it's an interesting use of how those things play out.
Now, I live in a different area now, and that utility has a smart metering system, and I have a customer portal. So when I came on, I was really excited about that. I set all my thresholds in there and everything. And you talked a little bit about a toilet flapper before, and because I set my thresholds, I was able to identify that, or the system identified or detected it, and I got a notification straight away. I didn't know, other than my water bill went from $35 to $38 that month, and I'm like, well, that's strange. Why is it a little bit higher? Anyway, it detected a potential leak, and then I went and looked around and fixed that leak. You know, water utilities struggle to find the business case or the justification for their end consumer, for us customers, and it's really there if they take that data and leverage it through a customer portal.
You know, that's the unique thing with customer leaks is you see it financially, you see it sustainability, and you see it in the customer satisfaction. So it's really an issue that hits on three big major problems for the utility industry. So it's good to see the technology advance in that and bring solutions in.
And I see how you continue to drink that beer. I think it's starting to grow on you.
It is. To be honest, it's getting better every sip, you know. What can I say?
Yep. That's maybe the 10% talking?
Could be.
If we want to leave with some things to remember from a leak perspective, a customer leak perspective, as we get to kind of leak forgiveness, property damage, bad debt, I think if we think about it, man, I could use some better word
Why don't you have some more
choice.
10% beer, Joe? Yeah,
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Excellent.
Right there.
So I think one of the big things is latency, right? And that goes to technology. So how quickly can we get that leak notification, right?
I think latency is a big issue because that curbs the time, and time is money, time is water, time is sustainability, all those things. So speeding that up is super valuable in multiple ways, Joe.
And then if I go back to the previous episode about customer leaks, if you haven't seen that, you should go watch that. Communication, right? The ability to get that notification, the communication to the customer so they could get that information right away, so they could reduce the high bill, and effectively that reduces leak forgiveness and bad debt in the utility side.
Yeah, today's not necessarily a pull society, but a push society. So with the portal, you get that information pushed right to the consumer. And if they don't adopt that technology, well, the utility has other ways to communicate them. And we've lowered that time cycle really to make that faster. So that curbs all those financial implications, whether it's forgiveness or bad debt, you take that off the table because you've sped the clock up. And you can detect lower thresholds. So not only can you do it faster, but you can detect smaller. So all those things are really, really valuable.
I agree. Well, if you enjoyed what you saw or heard, or didn't enjoy what you saw or heard, why don't you hit subscribe so you can go ahead and join us for our next episodes and topics that we discuss, as well as beers that we get to enjoy here.
And if you didn't like it, Joe and I want to keep doing this, so subscribe anyway, because there's very few things that we get to do that's as much fun as this. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, and thanks for joining us while we drink from the tap.
Joe, we talked a lot about leak forgiveness, so forgive me while I take a leak. See you, buddy.
All right. Excellent. So we have a great episode coming up where we are going to talk about customer leaks, and we are going to sample beers from Crooked Culture, which is
Crooked Culture, Joe. Culture.
Sorry.
Dude.
I didn't.
That's what was even better is we told you we were going to do it, and you went there anyway, so I had to call you out on it.
It's so good.